One of the collections we have down here that we use quite a bit with classes is our facsimile collection. This is a collection of medieval and Renaissance facsimiles of important manuscripts and documents. These are wonderful because it gives Carleton students a chance to see things that approximate items that they wouldn't otherwise get a chance to see. So this is a facsimile of a map from the middle of the 15th century called the Waltzburger World Map. And it's an interesting map because it's kind of a hybrid map between that has elements of a medieval map and a Renaissance map. You can see the entire world here surrounded by an ocean. We have Africa here on the top. Jerusalem is in the middle of the map, which was the traditional place to put Jerusalem. And in spite of the fact that for us, this doesn't look much like the world, this is a step towards a more realistic mapping of the world. Now, one of the things I mentioned is that we often acquire things if they're going to be useful in connection with other things we have. So we've done that with the facsimile maps. If we only had this map, we would just have this one shot. But we've got several of these that show us what happened during the Age of Exploration. So, for instance, 100 years later, we have this atlas made in northern France. And this atlas gives us relatively realistic images of Africa, Asia, the New World, and they're quite recognizable. The other interesting thing about this map is that it has wonderful images of the conquest. So, for instance, here, you can see this is South America here, and we have the Europeans showing the people who live there, working with them. Here we have Mexico City. And in addition to being interesting, it's a really beautiful atlas. Lots of decoration and. Next, we have one page from the Gutenberg Bible, which of course is the first book printed from movable type by Gutenberg, middle of the 15th century in Mainz, Germany. This is a page from the book of Ezekiel. We also have an example here. This is the Letters of St. Jerome. And this is an example of an incunable, or you may know it by incunabula, the Latin term. And this is what books are called that were printed in the first 50 years of printing with movable type. So this particular book, printed in Venice, in 1496, as I said, was Letters of St. Jerome. And one of the things you'll notice here is that there are no paragraph breaks. That was true of printing at that time. I'm just going to point out one thing, and that's when this was printed, as you can see, there was a space left for this initial. And then they printed the initial C. Some scribe went in later and did the initial C. Here's another, you can see it here. So this book was in some way a transition between manuscript and printed. This is probably the most important publication of the 18th century. Certainly people who study France think it is. But this is a volume of the Diderot Encyclopedia, an enormous 38-volume set. There are volumes of plates as well as texts. I think that we have most often used the plate volumes for students. They're beautiful. We use these both for students of history as well as actually studio art students use this. But one of the things that a book like this is is useful for is showing how people in the 18th century, what they were thinking about, because this really is a publication that represents the Enlightenment. Okay, well, everything else I'm going to show you is from the 20th century. One of the things that we have private press kind of luxury editions, and I've got some interesting examples. The first one is a book that, this is Heart of the Arctic, Ernest Shackleton's famous account of the first British Antarctic expedition that happened between 1907 and 1909. This was part of a large polar exploration gift that we were given by a alumnus named Arthur Hunt, who graduated in 1925. And this is a famous book, but this is a particularly interesting edition, because this was an edition that Shackleton published once he came back to make money for another expedition. One of the most interesting parts, well, first let me say, this is a good example of what we've done to take care of the books. This book has a vellum binding, and as you can see here, it's getting bowed, which is something that almost always happens with bindings that are made out of vellum. So we had a conservator make a box that is going to try to keep that bowing from happening any worse than it already is. Maybe I'll just step back for 1 minute, because I meant to show you this book, which is another example of a conservator's work. And this book had what we call a detached board. So the book board here was separate from the from the text block, and the conservator that we sent it to then put a new hinge, leather hinge, on the book. So that's one of the things we do to take care of the books. This mylar is another, or polyester sleeve is another thing that we do to protect the books. So back to the British Antarctic expedition. This is volume 3 of that same set. And what I think is so exciting about this volume is that it has the signatures of everyone who was on the expedition. So here you can see Shackleton, Frank Wild, George Marston, so several of the very famous polar explorers. You can see their signature here. Another book that I pulled out from our private press collection is The Song of Roland. And this is a kind of a subset of our private press collection. We have a large collection of books that were designed by the American book designer Bruce Rogers, who worked in the first half of the 20th century, both here and in England. Every book that he designed, he found a different kind of design for the book he looked at what he was printing and found an appropriate design. So this is the Song of Roland, so he's used a medieval stained glass window here. This is all hand colored, and you can see the initial is gold here, and he's used that kind of type too. Another collection that we're very lucky to have, and is also the gift of an alum, is we have a complete set of the first editions, modern firsts, of Ernest Hemingway's work. And this was given to us by Tom Morgan, a Carleton alum from the 50s. And so having a first edition with the dust jacket is what all collectors are trying to get. This is a very famous dust jacket as well. Here we have a Farewell to Arms, another in the Hemingway collection. And what's exciting about this one is that it actually is signed by Hemingway. A final collection, well, I have two final collections I'm going to talk to you about, and one of them is our artist book collection. This is a collection that we're still actively adding to, and these are books that they're somewhat like prints in that there are a small number of copies, but there are multiple copies, and artists create these as a work of art. This particular one that I have to show you is the work of Fred Hagstrom, our print instructor here at Carleton. And it has a Carleton story, a story about a young man who, Japanese American, who was interned during the war, and he was sent to Carleton as a way to complete his education. The artist, Fred, got most of the images, or several of the images, from the Carleton archives, the images and the letters. And he got other images from the archives of the camp where this student was and his family were interned. So it's really about the connection between this man and his family and Carleton. Finally, one of the collections we have books that are made by students, and studio art students. We have some of their work, but this one comes from an interesting source. That we teach here a history of print class every 2 or 3 years, and each student in the class creates a book, and they have to create a book with some handset type and one image that they've made. So this particular student has the text is part of the poem Beowulf, and then he's created this image to go with the text. Okay?
Well, there you have it. That's a brief tour in the many, many things that Special Collections has to offer. Ms. Wermager, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.